This is our University Place story. Our experience becoming a policy governance district in 2003 actually began in 2001. I will provide a short narrative describing how we made the decision, some alternatives we considered, how we actually used the model, and some lessons learned. Prior to 2001, our district experienced occasional misunderstandings or frictions between the board and its superintendent. Roles were at times confused. Who's in charge? Who's running the show? Board member concerns included not being a rubber stamp for the superintendent and staying up to date on what's going on. Superintendent concerns included the board's tendency to pick and choose issues of concern, veering in and out of micromanagement, and Monday morning quarterbacking decisions needed to run the district. One recurring area of concern happened toward the end of each year. In evaluation time, the board used a checklist of desirable superintendent traits and behaviors, focusing on good superintendent habits, but failed to emphasize what the district was or wasn't achieving. In 2001, while browsing the NSBA bookstore, I came across a copy of School Board Leadership 2000 by Gene Royer. This book describes the policy governance model as applies to school districts. I read the book on the flight home, taking note of how policy governance addresses issues with which we as a board superintendent team had been wrestling. I shared the book with other board members and the superintendent, and we had several discussions about its potential for addressing these issues over the course of the next year. By September 2002, we decided to get formal training in policy governance. It is important to note that all 5 board members and the superintendent attended this training. Preparation of staff occurred through principal staff attendance and meetings in which the board discussed key concepts in the model and how monitoring is conducted. The community was engaged through several linkage sessions whose object was to solicit community input as to what values we should include in our policies, especially those around our ends, describing what we want to see in our graduates as a result of our efforts. In spring of 2003, we scheduled a series of policy writing sessions. We developed the means policies and then ends policies, and then our annual agenda of meetings for the 2003-2004 school year, the first year of monitoring under our new model. We then launched the new approach with a resolution, a press release, and a public vote to proceed. Carver suggests 2 basic implementation approaches and compares them in terms of time and money. A policy blitz enables a board to move quickly, setting aside a 2 to 3 day retreat, a facilitated retreat, for preparing a detailed set of means policies and at least one global ends policy with which to get started. The policy blitz can be followed with immediate adoption. An incremental approach has the board moving more slowly, preparing a few policies at a time and gradually assimilating them. Conversion to this model takes considerably longer than with the policy blitz. Our board chose something closer to the latter than the former. We took more than a year to study and absorb the ideas in this model, gradually incorporating its concepts into our conversation, but by no means moving quickly. We set aside one work-study day at a time for policy development over a period of 4 to 6 months. One advantage we gained over time was that our staff members, some of our community, were very familiar with this change before we adopted it. A major element of our first year's agenda required planning and carrying out 4 linkages, entire board meetings during which we listened to community input regarding our policies. Total spent for 2002, 2003, and 2003, 2004 for University Place was $15,600. By comparison, Lake Washington, which also launched their policy governance model in 2003, chose the policy blitz. but it was more expensive, beginning and completing the work within several months with the help of an external consultants. Their cost was $57,000. These were in 2003 dollars, so would be considerably more today. This chart shows the amount of time we spent developing the 4 sets of policy during 4 day-long weekend special work sessions. Actions listed in bullets at the bottom of the page were taken at normal board meetings. With initial policies in place, we focused our first year's agenda on the 3 board job products: linkage with our community, assurance of performance, and policy review. We scheduled monitoring reports for each of our policies, making judgments throughout the year that, when assembled, constitute evaluation of the district and hence the superintendent. Policies for ends and executive limitations require monitoring to see if the district is achieving what it should and avoiding conditions it should avoid. Policies for governance process and board superintendent relations require monitoring of board performance. 4 linkage meetings were scheduled during the year to listen to community values and priorities. The year concluded with a comprehensive annual summative evaluation of the superintendent. Asterisks on this timeline show when we did major monitoring sessions during our meetings. And the text below shows our 4 meetings we held with the community. The normal cycle we follow in monitoring an individual policy is illustrated here. A policy is monitored in December to look at performance from all year long. Data is provided in the form of a monitoring report stating whether or not the policy is being upheld. The board responds to monitoring by judging compliance, then reviews its policy, and maintains or revises or updates the policy as needed for the next year. The cycle continues as the district does the work for the following year. The cycle for one policy is replicated for all other policies throughout the year. Because each aspect of district performance is closely monitored at set times throughout the year, the board continuously evaluates performance. This contrasts sharply with our previous practice of superintendent evaluation done in a closed meeting of a few hours' length at 1 meeting per year. Displayed in the outside ring are the executive limitations policies we monitored, and in the inside ring is our schedule for that first year of ends monitoring. We have found the following to be primary advantages of policy governance for our district. Rather than a 300-page policy set that is rarely, if ever, read by board members, we now govern the district with a small set of about 30 pages, which we review annually. The roles of board and superintendent are very clear, which in turn sets up a better system for accountability. Accountability is strengthened with a year-long and continuous evaluation of the superintendent based on clear measures of success. There are no surprises at year's end. Some concerns to consider. Policy governance is no substitute for board performance. As Carver says, it does not make a bad board good. The model can sometimes be challenged in the press or the election process by someone who does not understand it. Some find it hard to let the superintendent make operating decisions and trust that monitoring will assure accountability. Some superintendents are reluctant to accept full accountability for their role and prefer the cover that is offered when the board makes important program decisions. With regard to the who's in charge question our district had wrestled with, our answer under policy governance: for board business, the board is in charge and must do the work. For all other business, the superintendent runs the show and is accountable to the board for all decisions.